no Indian journal has started this as yet. The Indian Journal of Medical Ethics, which is one of the journals I'm associated with, brings it up every year in our editorial board meeting, and every year it gets shot down because, well, you'll see why. Next slide. The problem with it is, well, the advantage of it is theoretically it's more transparent. I know who I'm dealing with, you know who you're dealing with. The con, however, is that egos get rubbed often the wrong way. If I were to reject a paper written by an expert in the field, that person is going to get very, very annoyed with me. And tomorrow, if I were to appear for an interview and he were on that interview panel, I would definitely fail. So, in order to avoid that, I would probably accept the paper, or I would submit a bland review, which is non controversial and cannot get me into trouble. But what this means is this leads to nepotism. So I give a bland review for your paper, subsequently you give a bland review for my paper. The loser in this is science. So open peer review may work well in the Western system. So far it has, I don't think it is appropriate for India because of our social system. Next. So the ball is back in the editor's court once the referee has submitted his or her comments, about which, of course, Rakesh Datta will tell you in much greater detail later. So the editor may either accept the referee's comments and pass it on to the authors, or may send it to another referee, or may reject or revise with potential interest, or directly accept it. But rarely is the editor going to blindly accept the referee comments and without giving it some thought. There are times when both referees suggest accept the paper and the editor may go ahead and reject because the editor may be uncomfortable or may have seen something which the referees have missed, and vice versa. The next slide is, okay, so when your paper is accepted, why is your paper accepted? It's because it's a novel idea or data, it confirms a suspicion, or sometimes because it's controversial data and it is what you call a paradigm shift. But ultimately, it is subjective. The entire editorial process is going to be subjective in nature because that's what man is, subjective. Once the paper is published, you can get letters to the editor from authors who disagree with the paper. And this is what Dr. Sani calls post-publication peer review. It's very, very important. Post-publication peer review, which can set the records straight. Next. I think we're coming towards the very end. And this is a brief history, part 5, the recent past and the near future. Preprints. Preprints are now hot. The website bioRxiv and the medical journal Curious ask for preprints, where you just put up your paper without peer review, submit it to them, they accept it and put it up. And then you start getting in comments from readers who visit these sites or these journals and put in their comments. Based on the comments that you get, you modify your paper and submit it to a standard indexed journal. It's a kind of crowdsourcing and it has its pros and cons. The physics world has been doing it for the last 50 years. Medicine has always been much more reluctant to do it, but the world of biology has started it maybe about 10 years ago, and I suspect this is going to be the future. This year, because of this COVID scare, a lot of papers have been going to these non-peer-reviewed journals because in order to save time. The advantage is obvious, it saves time. The disadvantage is that you might put out junk research out there and people might use it to treat their patients before discovering that it was junk science. Open peer review has happened in the real past, and I think despite all its problems, this is going to be the future. In the future, authors are going to demand more transparency from journals, and journals have to listen to their authors, have to listen to their readers and to their authors. And I think over the next 20 years, we will be going towards open peer review. And finally, the latest change which has taken place in journals. Could I have the previous slide? The Lancet, as you know, had this big mess up recently, as well as the New England Journal of Medicine, where there was fraudulent data which was published. And so the Lancet has recently introduced this. We require that more than one author has verified the underlying data. In those papers, only one author had verified the underlying data, and so it was published. They now require more than one author. The problem with this, as I see it, is that it could be two authors and they could be hand in glove with each other. So it's going to be only a matter of time before journals change it to, we require that all authors have verified the underlying data. But this is my hunch on what the future is going to be. My last slide is a paper which I published this year in the Indian Journal of Cancer, How to Referee a Paper and Save the World. Those of you who referee papers may benefit by looking at it. You might get some points. And of course, if you find something to disagree with it, please write a letter to the editor, because that will be post-publication peer review. Thank you. If there are any questions, I'll take them.
Yeah, thanks for those wonderful insights, sir. There are one or two small questions. I would just read them out. Uh, there is something like uh, researches are planned according to market. They know that by fooling people through publications, they can sell medicines worth trillions, like anti-lipidemics, etc. And if we listen to people like Dr. B.M. Hegde, we can understand how much fraud is there in research industry. This is a comment. Would you like to respond to this, sir?
Well, yes, there is fraud. There is fraud in research. There is no doubt about it. And that's what the role of the editor and the peer reviewer is, to try to detect it as much as possible. We are not perfect. We are far from perfect. We're trying to get out there. Like I said, this Lancet thing, this change which they've done, more than one person has to see data and to confirm that the raw data is correct. But yes, there is research misconduct out there. Uh, most of us know people who have indulged in research misconduct. To my knowledge, no action has been taken against most of these people. That's one of the problems. We are to blame. We are not taking action against those who are indulging in research misconduct, and therefore we are to blame.
Yeah,
If as
especially.
an editor, I find that someone has indulged in research misconduct, it is my duty to write to the dean or the director of that institute and to take it up and inform them. Very often editors don't do it, and so we are to blame. That's of course a partial truth. There are reasons behind it, but
Right.
we need to know that.
Right. For instance, recently, PubPeer has become a platform to flag such misconducts.
Yes.
But I don't think any serious action has been taken against the authors indulged in such maybe manipulation of the pictures, figures, and so on. Uh, would you like to comment on that, sir?
Well, essentially, it's the same as this. We have to clean up our act, and we need to, join hands together and fight this. We need to see to it that, like the US has an Office of Research Integrity, we need to have an equivalent of that. We need to convince our deans and directors, maybe the Medical Council of India, that this kind of thing is not on. Uh,
Right. You while mentioning about the raw data, you mentioned something that we cannot the reviewers can't ask the raw data.
no, we
Is
can
that
ask for.
something you
No, no,
can
we can
ask?
ask for. We do. Huh? And
And we
I
should.
do as an editor often ask for raw data. If the numbers don't match, I say I'd like to see the raw data because something doesn't fit. And sometimes
Okay.
authors are willing to send it in, and sometimes they're reluctant to send it in. The fact that they are reluctant to send it in answers your question.
Okay.
What
Right.
the Lancet has now said is that more than one person must have access to that data. Until recently, it was the corresponding author should have access to all the data and should take responsibility for all the others. Now they want at least two people to see it. My hypothesis is that in the future they're going to say everybody should have access to it, which is correct, because
Right.
everybody's taking the responsibility for it. And if one person, or if these two guys have lied, they go down, everybody's going to go down with them. I would certainly not
True.
want to go down because of somebody else's cheating. So I would want to have access
Absolutely.
to all of it. You see, all of you
Right.
are going to share the prize, all of you are going to share the punishment too.
Right. Right. So thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for those remarks and also the insightful talk. Maybe Dr. Ashwini will take up this discussion further. Dr. Ashwini.
Yes. So now from Dr. Pai's talk, it's very clear that how crucial is the role of the reviewer, how in this whole process. That's why we have the next talk by Dr. Datta, Dr. Rakesh Datta, about path of becoming an ideal reviewer. How can one can be an ideal reviewer? So Dr. Rakesh Datta is professor in AFMC Pune and also faculty in Medical Council of India Regional Center in AFMC Pune. He is editor-in-chief of Medical Journal for Armed Forces India, and He's very passionate teacher. I think he likes teaching in field of ENT, as well as for making doctors more well versed with IT skills and so on. And he takes a very serious interest in publishing the biomedical research. He has activities like what we having today through Impact, which he has founded and is organizing chairperson for, actually, which included peer reviewers as well as the editors and for in the conference. And so those efforts actually say that how interested he is in the publishing the biomedical research. And we will listen to his experience and insights into how to become a good reviewer. Over to you, sir, Dr. Datta.
Thank you, Dr. Ashwini. That's very pleasant. Nice of you. I'll just share my screen first. So, good afternoon, everyone. The topic which I am going to talk today is the path to being an ideal peer reviewer. So, when this topic was given to me, I thought, let me look at what this path is and how it goes and what it's going to be. And so the first thing which we usually do when we are asked faced with a question is Google it. So this is what I also did. And I went to Google and I said, okay, let me see, what does this question, ideal peer reviewer, does this get me any answers? So before Google could give me an answer, my Windows gave me a pop-up. The ideal peer reviewer, this entity does not exist. And just to rub it in, it also asked me, was this information helpful? What retry, ignore? Well, the truth is there is no ideal peer reviewer. So ever we might want that we want an ideal peer reviewer, this entity does not really exist. So that's a fact for most of editors. And as I move on and I start, let me first give a few disclosures. I am presently the editor-in-chief of medical journal Armed Forces India. I am on the editorial board of one of the ENT journals, and I was previously heading Journal of Laryngology and Voice. Okay. So what I'm going to cover is what's inside the box. A few questions, and a few questions I will not cover today. Should I accept to view? We'll first ask ourselves this question: should I accept to peer review a particular article when it comes to us? There is a topic which has been assigned to me called quality assurance, and I had to read myself for it. So I will just talk a bit about quality assurance in peer review. I'll talk something which I am very passionate about, that is reviewer recognition. And in the end, I will talk about 10 tips, that is 5 do's and 5 don'ts, and we'll discuss them and we'll be happy to take questions on peer review. The next thing which I'll not cover is why peer review, which has been adequately covered by Dr. Pai. The review process, which is all well known to you. I believe we have more than 550 people who are live with us, and they're all people who have actually been into publishing. I will leave these two other angles because there's another talk on this by Dr. Piyush on ethical considerations and conflict of interest. We will not cover these issues in this talk. The first question which comes is, should I accept to review? And that's a very important question which crops up when such an email comes. You're all excited. This is a very recent thing which came to me, for example. You say, yes, I got an invite from one of the leading journals. And of course, it's happened for the first time for many people, and it's a very exciting moment. You feel, yeah, finally, am I being recognized? Am I an expert now? But when this thing comes, I think what is important is the first question which we are going to answer, and that is halt and check. Okay, first we do is halt and check and ask ourselves 4 questions. So the first question is, you ask yourself in a very honest way, am I really an expert? For example, I got an article to peer review. I had a recent publication on the infodemics of how social media spread COVID. And then I got an article to review, which was something to do with social sciences. And it was with COVID and how the information was being spread. I'm an ENT surgeon by training, and I'm an editor by passion. And other than that, I did do a survey and I did get good data. but I'm not definitely an expert on that field. So remember now, as editors, there's always a dearth of good peer reviewers. We're always looking out. And one of the ways of looking out peer reviewers is we look at articles which are published in public domain and look at good articles and try to request those authors, would they like to review? So at times they may not necessarily be the experts. So first question, are you an expert in a particular field? Would you be really the right person? When I say expert, it should also mean that I am conversant with the current literature on this topic, not necessarily mine, but even what is currently going on. The next question, a very important question, do I have the time? Now, this is something which is a very debatable thing. No one has time for anything. But here you have to ask yourself, can I spare this much of time for this particular noble task? And it's important to do so. But at the same time, this question is very important because if you are currently engaged in a hot pursuit of a particular systematic review, and you have 3 weeks only to submit your review, probably you should ask this question, despite the fact that it's very tempting. Will I be able to devote the time to this review? Good review does need time. You need to ask yourself very honestly, and this honesty is something like what Dr. Sanjay was also saying, that there are so many issues along with the peer review, and there are problems with peer review. And one of the ways is to be honest about it yourself and ask this question: is there a conflict of interest? Conflict of interest does not disqualify, but it qualifies to the editor that yes, please take my review with this particular conflict of interest in mind. I also am working in a similar field. For example, if I am working in translating a particular questionnaire and I get an article which translates a similar questionnaire, I may tend to sort of push it down. Okay, first of all, why can't I have the first one, or sort of thing. So this is a pure, straightforward conflict of interest. You're working in a similar field. So this is something which needs to be declared, because then the editor will be very appreciative, or he might or she might be very clear in taking your reviews with a pinch of salt. Okay, and the last question is a very difficult question, but something which you need to ask yourself. So when you get this email, ask yourself, will I be fair and objective? And being fair and objective is something what is really needed of a peer reviewer. We are trying to judge good science, and you have to ask yourself this question: will I be fair in assessing this science, and will I be objective, or will I be like, I didn't like it? You have to be objective in your comment. So these 4 questions are something which needs to be asked whenever this email comes to you. And if you answer each one of them to yourself, you don't have to answer this to the editors. If you feel that, yes, this is what is there, then you should go and accept that one. We come to the next part of what we were to talk about, and that is quality assurance in peer review. I did read a bit about quality assurance otherwise, but I never applied this in the context of quality assurance. But when I read more about it, I realized how subconsciously we all as editors do to some extent. When we talk about quality control and quality assurance, we talk about numbers. So it's important that the peer reviews which come, or which are written, to improve their quality, they should be structured in nature. So everything is covered. 2 very common schemes are used. And one of the schemes is scheme A, which I've written on the slide, is got the following flow. The reviewer first writes down in a couple of lines what the reviewer understood about the manuscript. This gives a very clear and crisp understanding whether the manuscript has been clearly read. This can be in a very layman terms, followed by a couple of lines which says what was good. It's always important to start like that. And what can be better, followed by major concerns and minor concerns. This is a very common scheme used by many peer reviewers, and we've seen many of them follow this very well. Even when we review, I prefer this scheme myself personally. So it first tells you what exactly you've understood from the manuscript, and what is good and what's probably not so good, or what can be better. And then we come down to what are the major concerns and the minor concerns. This gives a very clear-cut, structured peer review to the editor. There's another one which is getting more and more popular, and this is checklist based. Many journals also have some of these checklists, and these are many times based on this Equator Network guidelines, or even otherwise, they can say you find out segment wise in the introduction, following problems, in the methods, following problems, in the results, in the abstracts, in the figures. And this is another way where a lot of peer reviewers do give us comments. Again, really, we should appreciate the amount of hard work which goes down into this, and many do it very well. 3 to 4 page long reviews, which goes segment wise. When you're doing this, the publishing guidelines, which are there in Equator Network, many of these can be used as checklists. For example, the CARE checklist for case reports. So if you adopt these checklists without being very dogmatic at times, but then at least to a fair amount, it gives you a good quality check of whether the peer review is good or not. So quality needs to be measured. So how do you measure a good peer review? So one, the challenge is to add objectivity in these scales or in the referees. How do you measure? Give him a numeric. There are multiple rating scales for quality. We'll just have a look at a couple. One very important quality indicator is the response rate. If I've sent out 16 invitations, how many have they been accepted? And number two, the time taken. If my time given was 21 days, how much time delay or how much early did the thing? Most of our online submission systems do calculate these metrics. If you go down to the reports and try to do reviewer reports, you get these inbuilt metrics. That's what I said. We've been doing this very often, but I never went consciously into the concept of quality control for quality assurance for peer reviewers. So inbuilt metrics are there in these online submission systems, which will tell exactly how much percentage acceptance is there and how much time the referee will average take. Now there's a review quality instrument, and this is called RQI. I have not used it myself, and as I said, I also learned in preparing this talk. And this is a quality instrument which actually gives a rating, and probably a few journals have adopted it. I was surprised when I did this study, when I was studying for this. There's a systemic review which has none less than 18 rating scales. So there are 18 different peer review rating scales, and there's a systematic review to it, which has been published. And I have not been using a rating scale, but definitely this shows that peer review can be measured to a certain extent, and some scales do exist for trying to see whether it meets quality requirements. Practically what we do, we have a global rating by editors. This is not scale, but generally when we are giving the editors agree to a review, they have an option or window for giving a scale rating. Also in the editorial manager systems, we have the history of the peer reviews done earlier, which give you a rough idea of whether this peer reviewer has been timely or whether this peer reviewer has been very strict. At times you find peer reviews who have only rejected, at times who accept very easily. And at times when you click and see the reviews, you realize that how in depth have they gone in the review. So you can practically, we do have a look at the peer reviews and rate them accordingly. And of course, one criteria which we said, what we follow a lot in our thing is the timeliness. So that was the second part of how do you do quality assurance in terms of type peer review. When the peer reviews come to us, we do subconsciously judge them this in a practical way, but there are also rating scales and there are also other methods of finding out whether the rating has been good. Okay. Probably more editors should adopt them, I guess. Now, review recognition. So everyone needs a pat sometime. And this photo is created to one of the RB snaps from Twitter. And this was a dog which was received a commendation medal this last month for saving a life in one of the high altitude areas. So everyone needs a pat sometimes. So how do you recognize a reviewer? Fundamentally, peer review has been a very non-profiteering job. It's never been meant to make money. And the moment money gets attached to any particular motive, it becomes profiteering. You never know which way it goes after that. Historically, recognizing reviewers, there have been limited avenues. It's traditionally something which is you don't ask money for, and it's like giving back to academics. And as one of my colleagues mentioned a few days back, it is not giving it back, it's giving back to academics. So it's giving back what you have probably been through this rut and you have climbed, and now you're giving back what your knowledge is. So review actually is a very, to that extent, a bit of a noble job. But how do we give credit? So there are three large platforms or three large zones where you will give credit to. We give credit to editors in a personal academic development, reviewer recognition platforms, and journal privileges and perks. So this might answer a question: what is it for me? So when it comes to personal academic development, definitely being a peer reviewer adds to your CV. It might make a difference in that particular interview. It might make a difference to the promotion, especially if you've been because if you are being asked to peer review, you are considered an expert in that field. You do get access to newer research trends, and I don't mean that you should be copying them. That's what Dr. Pai said about plagiarism by the peer reviewers. But definitely, you get early access to what the world's researching on. You get access, you get an insight. You do develop critical thinking skills, and I think that's also very important when you're doing a peer review. You realize that it's not easy always, and you have to find out problems. You see reviewers of other reviewers, and it definitely develops your skills. Some of the very important things that has happened in my case, it helps you become a better author. And how it works is because when you are writing, you find out problems of others, which you would be sort of hesitant to find out in your own self. And the next time when you write, you probably try to subconsciously gets in somewhere, and you become probably a better author to a certain extent. So I think it helps a person develop academically to do peer review. There are reviewer recognition platforms, and I'll just mention three. ORCID has recently tied up with a few journals, and they have started mentioning peer review as one of their. They mention, of course, they have been mentioning your publication lists and your projects and all. They have also now I'm mentioning your, but this cannot be fed by the peer reviewers themselves. It's done by the journals. Some of the journals do it. The other one, which is very popular, is Publons, and they also have these annual rewards, and they also have tied up. This is owned by Claravate, so they tie up with some of the journal publishing houses, and that automatically a review gets sort of acknowledged on Publons, and people do get academic credit at times for this to have like maybe you have H index for articles, maybe one day you have a reviewer index, who knows. So this is something which also has been there. And Elsevier has been not far behind, and they have this reviewer hub, and this is limited to Elsevier journals, but it's very interesting because MGFI is published through Elsevier, so we use this a lot. And you can see I've just highlighted, like for example, after doing a review, you can see the person has been given 30 days of complimentary access to Science Direct and Scopus, other than the certificate. So there are rewards and certificates, of course, which some of these publishing houses also gives. At times, this also is an incentive. Some people do not have access to it so easily, so they do give access to some of their paid products when you do a successful peer review, and the journal editor marks it as done. What does MGFI? We do have, and many journals do it. We publish the pool of reviewers once a year. We do have the best appreciation award, 10 certificates we have per year, and we honor them. We call a few, we even give them the certificates so that the top 2 come actually to us in one of these annual events, which we do, and they're given a certificate for appreciation. So it is at least some peer recognition is there following peer reviewer. Otherwise, it remains faceless. I have heard of good peer reviewers actually being onboarded. So suppose there is a person who does a fantastic peer review, maybe in statistics, maybe they want an associate editor in statistics. They will probably look for that particular person in this context, because if the person is doing very good peer reviews, might be onboarding them in the journal as well. So these are the other journal perks and privileges. So it's not that it's a thankless job. Definitely, it's a very noble job. It's something which will remain without money as of now. Though some newer trends, some journals are, I think, trying some monetary system as well. But mostly it will remain with certain perks and privileges. And it's definitely something which each one of us should do it very proudly. The last part is I was being asked to give 10 tips to be the ideal peer reviewer, which is something which does not exist. So let me see if I can do justice to it. And these top 10 tips, I was myself in a debate, which one is the top 10. I had made a list of tips. So I have made 5 do's and I made 5 don'ts. I hope they're of practical importance. My talk is trying to be a bit practical. First tip is very important. And that first tip is that you have to say to yourself, I will call them the commandments or whatever. I will adhere to timelines. Because one of the reasons why peer review has been given that bad name is because it says it wastes time. I went for peer review and my article took 18 months. This has happened. So adhering to timelines is important for everyone. And one of the places where maximum this delay will occur is peer review. So one tip, once you're doing this, adhere to timelines. Next, remember people who have written these articles, though it's blinded, they might be very, they've done a sincere job. There might be people who are of equal standing, maybe more, maybe less, but professional courtesy is very important. So one of the jobs as an editor is actually at times to moderate certain comments. So, because we have read at times some comments are pretty nasty at times. So they will write about this article does not merit anything, this article should be thrown. So one has to be courteous. Of course, if there is no merit in the article, one can share that and say that in a very courteous way. So I would recommend peer reviews to be, and many of them are, but no, it's not always. So there are times when reviews aren't very courteous. So you have to even be very polite in saying no. One very important task, I think something which is the key or the heart of peer review, is trying to improve what Dr. Sanjay said in the beginning. One of the initial needs of having a peer review was to improve the quality of the articles. So the peer review has a fundamental task of being constructive and trying to give suggestions, even if it is rejected, of how this article or how the manuscript can be improved. At times, the constructive criticism goes to an extent by saying that do the entire study with a different method. That doesn't help. But definitely be constructive in certain ways. This table can probably be better depicted in a chart. This chart is probably not the right thing here. So therefore, it is important to be constructive when you're giving peer review. One important thing which I did put in this list, because I belong to a journal which is multi-speciality in nature. There might be other journals which are hardcore into a particular specialty. Peer reviews often do not address the problem as the journal would want it. They might go into the science of it, which is very good. But at times, they also need to understand the readership. If the readership is of general nature, or if it's of a multi-speciality nature, or is it something which is hardcore? So there's a journal only on cytogenetics. It is important for the peer reviewer to understand this as well. Many editors would have done a desk reject of many articles which are not in the scope of the journal. But definitely it helps a lot for the peer reviewer to understand the scope and the readership of the journal when they're reviewing this. This is very important. And this is a problem which many of us face. We review a manuscript. We find some problems. We say there's a major revision. And then the author spends another 2 months, 3 months revising it. And then it comes back to me and I refuse to accept the re-review. I do not accept. I forget the acceptance of the article. I do not accept the invitation. So where does that leave the manuscript and the editor? Now, there are problems which you pointed out. Whether they have been fixed or whether they have been fixed to your satisfaction, probably you're the best person to judge that. So this is something which, please take it as a mantra. If you have reviewed a manuscript, it's like a commitment to see the subsequent reviews as well. If this does not happen, we as editors do get stuck and then try to get another reviewer to say, no, it was reviewed by someone else, but please still have a look, is not easy and not everyone agrees. So this is a problem which many editors do face, and this is a honest appeal on that. 5 nots. I will not agree to the review request unless I sincerely can. This is something which we covered in the beginning, and I think this is very important. the hurry to accept, it's just a link. So many of us accept because even despite the fact that we don't have time, the right expertise, and at times probably we are hard pressed, we are traveling, but still we say, "Chalo, let's accept it." So I think it is important not to agree to the review as a routine, but after a very considered decision. So this considered decision, based on what 4 points which we had said in the earlier part of my talk, is important. Okay, let me credit Dr. Sanjay Pai here, and I just learned this term, Nero, and this term is I will not agree to review and then disappear. So this does happen, and I just learned this term right now, and this is something which is very frustrating for authors, editors, and that you agree to review and then you disappear. Then we keep sending reminders. So in the hope that you have accepted, we just will give you a reminder, a couple of reminders, and then say, no, please come on and review it. You might give a call or two, which goes unanswered. So don't be Dero. And I would request everyone who reviews, agrees to review. If there is a delay, genuine delay, it's always okay to tell, look, can we just delay it by 2 weeks? I am stuck with a particular rotation. I've got some problems or whatever. I'm sure the editors would be very happy. Another problem which we face, and again, something which happens very often, there are two segments in the review: remarks to the editor and remarks to the author. So in the remarks to the editor, the person writes, this article, this study should not have been conducted. There is no novelty. There is no, the data doesn't seem to be accurate at all. The methods are wrong. And in the author, he starts off by saying, of course, being polite, congratulations on a well done study. And then he goes on and explains certain points, and he's at a variance. So when we send it back, of course, we have access to 2-3 reviewers, and we take a considered call that, okay, this is something which should go back and probably not suitable for our journal. Actually, the word reject hurts a bit. So at times we do try to say that this does not sort of match with our requirements. So when there is a variance, and immediately the author says, but I had fantastic reviews. So that is a place where there is a bit of conflict situation which does occur. And I would recommend, be very honest, polite, but don't be at a variance by saying that the article is not as good, and then saying this article has congratulations on doing such a novel article work. So that's something which we really see, and I would just mention about that. Ethics, something which is important, but I have seen this happen in conferences at times. People walking up and giving a talk and saying, I reviewed this article and I rejected it, or I accepted it. So one of the thing is, you will consciously forget what you have done once you have reviewed it. The journals will tell you, shred that article. There are so many articles which we have seen, but if we go and brag about them, that we accepted them or we rejected them as peer reviewers, it takes away a bit of a lot of it can cause problems, and this is something which I would sincerely request. One of the it's not a major point, but that's why tip 10 I wanted to include this. At times you send it to a peer reviewer who does line by line copy editing. What I mean is, they get into this should be capitalized, there should be a comma, there should be a paragraph here, and this is probably not spelled well, the grammar can be changed. I think what is important, you give a general statement that the grammar and English may be improved, but do not go line by line and do this. You see, we have paid people. We have these publishers who have paid people to do the same job. The peer review is for the science of it. Whether it is comprehensible science, it doesn't have to be necessarily very accurate English. Remember, many of these people will not have English as a native language, which is acceptable. Therefore, there needs to be improvement. You can even suggest that this article should be read and submitted through a person who knows better English. But do not in your review try to be a copy editor. That doesn't add value to the paper in terms of science. So that is something which we get at times, a good long review with a lot of work done, with a revised document given back, with a lot of copy editing done. So that's another point which is not really under the purview of. These are my top 10 tips for peer reviewers. And just remember, peer review is the heart of scientific research and publication, and let us place full trust in it. And we can't wish it away. We can't wish it away, and we wish that it would become better, and we have more trust in it. And that's the theme for this peer review week this year as well. And finally, a word of gratitude towards my own journal, which has paid me for this talk, my own organization. And definitely the organizers, the Journal of Ayurveda and Integrative Medicine, they've taken they're a fantastic journal which is doing very well. And we are proud to be, we are sort of sister journals, and we are proud to be associated with them. And thanks to all the editorial team and for this opportunity and allowing us to share our thoughts. So I'll be happy to take on questions, Dr. Ashwini, if they are. I will be happy to do that.
Yeah. Thanks. I think this was very helpful, especially because we have so many reviewers, young reviewers attending the talk on Facebook and YouTube. So thanks a lot, sir. So we have few questions. I'll take a first one is that what is this tie-up with Orchid, which you
Okay,
talked
so
about?
certain publishing houses, once the peer review is done, and if you're logging into Editorial Manager with Orchid, they have an option where you can say my peer review can be shared to Orchid. So if you see the Orchid profile, you have the professional qualifications, you have the articles done, which you have authored. You can, Orchid will automatically add another segment, which will talk about reviews done. It will not tell you which article it has reviewed, but it will say, for example, this author has reviewed 3 times for Medical Journal Armed Forces India. It adds to your CV if you were to use Orchid as one of these. It doesn't happen with my journal yet. It does happen internationally with many journals. It automatically gets linked to Orchid.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And that the question is that how does we choose the reviewer? Like a PhD student, a PhD scholar. How do we judge the experience of the reviewer? And because sometimes the time available with the junior people will be more, and
Yeah.
they will be more enthusiastic about reviewing a paper, while the experience is more with the senior colleagues, and then that's when
Very true. So finding reviewers is always a challenge for the editors. And a journal like ours, we always send it to minimum 3 reviewers. And one of the reviewers usually will be a person who's not very senior. And this is a way of getting more and more editors into more and more peer reviews into your pool. Being young is no disqualification or criteria for not being a good peer reviewer. In fact, many times you get very good peer reviewers from people who are just doing their postdoc or they are actually PhD doing PhD, and we encourage them. Definitely to give it a balance and an overall, we do also send it to a senior reviewer. And as you said, and as I told you, we keep adding a bit of our own internal insights into who's a good reviewer, and then we send more and more. But we also have seen a reviewer fatigue. So to keep cycling the reviewers, we have this pool, and when we say, okay, this person is doing good review, however, give him a couple of months break. So we do have this internal system, and we encourage whenever a person signs up as an author nowadays, there is an option where they can volunteer to be a reviewer, and that gets suggested to us. We will go and see that person's profile from various platforms, what has been their contributions to research, and we actually aggressively go out and seek reviewers irrespective of their seniority. So if someone is interested, they can simply go to the journal and say, I want to review for you. The editor will be delighted.
Correct. Yes. So one other question, which is kind of, I don't know whether you won't take it up. What is the maximum timeline you would give a reviewer? Like if a reviewer is constantly asking for more time, when do you say stop? And
Okay, so I would take my initial first line is 3 weeks. I will easily extend it to another 3 weeks. That's not an issue. Beyond that, probably 1 or 2 weeks. Otherwise, we will change the reviewer. But this is also not a routine. If the person is, suppose if we send out to 3 reviewers and a person, we have not got a positive reply as was said 33%. So maybe that's a similar figure here as well. So only 1 replies. I may not cancel this review, but I will add another reviewer by that time. So, so that the moment I reach that figure of like we have an internal, if we have a multi-speciality article, we will try to get a reviewer from each specialty. Suppose there's a person from pathology and surgery and statistics. We will try to get one review from each. And the moment that happens, we will sort of cut off and we will regret the rest of the reviewers.
Okay, I think a couple of questions are actually also combining, I think, for Dr. Piyush Sahani's after that talk. So I'll keep it for that, and
Sure.
but at that time maybe both of you can answer if required.
Definitely.
That's also about ethics in peer reviewing and so on.
Yeah.
So thanks a lot, sir, again, and we will be glad. So if there are many questions, relevant questions, can we email them to you, and would you like
Yes,
to?
yes, definitely, not an issue. It's not a problem at all. Not a problem.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you
Thank you,
so much.
Dr. Ashwini. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
So we will have a small change in sequence, and we will be having talk by Mr. John Weeks now. So is that okay, sir? Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Okay.
I have I'm happy to introduce Mr. John Weeks, and he's a writer, speaker, and change agent in the field of integrative health and medicine. He has 37 years long experience as a chronicler and speaker, organizer, executive, and consultant for policies and actions in this field. He's been writing about this, the policies, actions, everything about integrative health and medicine for last 25 years. He's editor-in-chief for Journal of Complementary and Alternative Medicine, which is for paradigm, practice, and policy advancing in integrative health. And once he has, since he has taken up the office of editor-in-chief for JCAM, there has been a lot of good things. A lot of the graph has gone up for number of submissions by 40% and 200% more downloads. That's a lot of change. So you can see that the impact factor of the journal has also gone up. The JCAM, Journal of Complementary and Alternative Medicine. Mr. Weeks has been consulting various organizations, including NIH and Insurance Commissioner, AHA, and has recently started.
नाही नाही हा
Dr.
बोलते
Mule,
ना मी.
you
आता
need
मी
to.
जरा वेगळ्या पोझिशनला बसलीये. नेटचा प्रॉब्लेम असल्यामुळे.
Tanuja, can you mute? Yeah. So sorry for that. So this Mr. John Weeks has been consultant with various organizations like NIH and Insurance Commissioner of Washington State, AHA, and he's also recently started working with WHO and Pan America Health Organization, PAHO, and last but not the least, he has been awarded 4 doctorate degrees by 4 different institutions, and still he wants us to call him Mr. Weeks. I think this talks a lot about him, and today he will be speaking with us about how he looks at the peer review as an editor-in-chief of the journal. Over to you, Dr. Weeks. Yeah.
Very much for. I hope the internet connection works from Seattle here. Thank you for the very kind introduction, and also just for the invitation to participate with you. I have my learner's hat on here, and it's good for me to be part of your process. I'm taking to kind of spread my talk a little bit from what I've been assigned, and I hope that I won't offend. The center will certainly be around peer review, but I'm also including some more general comments about what we're doing at JACM, partly to you as editors, but it also is a different way of thinking about journals, perhaps. And I hope these additional comments will be fine. I've been an unusual person in this position, and it influences what I can do. Brought in because of my knowledge of the field rather than my experience in science. It's required me with the journal to have an extremely close relationship with my editorial board and key members in particular. The editors will know that many pieces don't get past you just see them and you realize that this piece is not going anywhere. In my case, frequently need the assistance of one of my editorial board members to do that. So we do a pre-review process before we get there. But I just want to state that it's become so clear to me in this process that the production of science, but also the management of our journal, and I think most, is really, it takes a village model. It is a large variety of engaged people who are needed to bring a journal forward and to advance it. And the core of that, as Mr. Nato pointed out, is the review process. So this was some of what we were bragging about, because things have been going well. Again, through engagement, we're in an interesting world, because while we're involved in science, it's our core work. Often with these fields, we're also involved in kind of pushing our ways into more recognition. And so there's an advocacy part of what we do. At the end, I'll talk about something some of us have been doing in this department, but it's important to separate out those functions, but also recognize them. We've done that in part with our publication by beefing up the commentary area and beefing up our special issues to focus on certain areas where we know we can have the highest impact in the broader culture by pulling the science in those areas and commentary. So we've had a series of special issues. Strategically, as a journal editor, it's helped the engagement of people in our community with JACM and with our goals. I just wanted to point out a couple of commentaries that we've been very pleased to have here, and both of them have our editorial board member, Bhushan Pardwan, as one of the editors, and value the commentaries as much as we do. We've developed some relationships with some organizations where they've been interested also in this mission, of engaging the problem areas with our research and our relationship to the broader community. It should be pointed out that the commentaries themselves have need to be peer reviewed outside of the process, but you can't just say whatever you want to in a commentary either. You still need to be adhering to evidence that is based in science if you're going to be making claims. So let me drop inside to the editor's work here. We use Manuscript Central, and this is what my dashboard looks like now. It's rare that I have my reviewers' selections I have all the articles reviewed. This is not the best part of my decision. But if you look at this, you will see this overdue reviewer response. This happens. And I just want to underscore how important it is to know that you have the time. And if you find that you're not going to make the time frame, communicate. If you need 2 weeks, if you communicate and know that you can do that in those 2 weeks, then let me or let the editor know, and they can decide whether to say, okay, I'll trust you for that, or they should go to somebody else. But we don't want to see these numbers for overdue scores, for overdue responses as big as what I'm seeing here. My job is to keep those numbers down. When we're reviewing, when I'm reviewing, my pattern typically is to go to all 3 of my sources of editors, of reviewers. One is inside of Manuscript Central down at the bottom here, is a number of names that they will, for a given topic, they'll bring who are skilled in that area and have published in the area and therefore are a good fit. I will say these systems don't necessarily do such a good job with that. The 2 other areas are, one of them is that authors put forward names of potential reviewers. There's danger here if you've named a reviewer, then you immediately wonder about conflict of interest as a journal editor. That being said, but the system keeps in my mind that I know they were suggested by the reviewer. So in gauging their response, I have the thought that there's a higher chance of a conflict of interest that might not be disclosed, or there's a proximity. So it's there, but it to me, and I'll get into this, I don't mind the other, or you've worked with a person. The important thing is knowing about it. The third place we go is to your editorial and or a list of other people who can be good reviewers. I keep a very large, in the bottom right here, it's a table function document that just, if I've found somebody was a good reviewer on a certain topic, I'll take them and bring them into my own file that's relatively disorganized but works for me. And I can pull names up, some recollection of what they've done in the past and how they did it. So it's a mix. I always try to have one person who I know decently well, or know their work decently well, as kind of the anchor of the peer review process. Regarding conflicts, the reality is, are people who have worked in the same field at a top level, and so they know, have met at conferences, have got excited and have collaborated at some point, particularly with a long career, with that person. Many people are pretty good at being adults and going ahead and giving a direct review. Even I have had spouses reject the work of their spouses before. To me, and this may be a difference, the important thing is the transparency, that you ask up front or you put it in your notes to the editor afterwards. words, what the nature of your relationship is, so that then I will have that lens to look through responses. There's an interest, this has to do with both submissions and reviewers as we're gauging the reviews. And it has to do with opportunity, it has to do with equity, it has to do with resource availability. But we see, very different reviews often based on the extent of resources in which the person works. A huge academic health center in the US has simply got much more dollars behind their reviews, behind their research, and people have more opportunity. They have more opportunity for training. They have more budget to do research, and you'll see these discrepancies in the quality of the review that have to do, frankly, with how much resource. We see it here in the United States between people who've gone to acupuncture schools that are less resourced. They're not in the flow of research money from the US government. People who've gone to naturopathy schools, they tend to be better because their basic medical science is stronger. But I was shocked by this person. He was a chiropractor who has a PhD and a job at an academic medical center. He's a great reviewer. And he told me that when he reviews for JACM, he only is sort of half into it compared to when he reviews for JAMA or some of the other, I guess, first line journals out there. So there's a great flex in the level of review that we see. I'm just going to drop into some of my wishes, I think. When you're asked, it's nice if you decline instead of just disregarding. It's just nice to see that it's been seen. If you do decline, if you know somebody, there's usually, at least in our case, there's a place to recommend people who might be good reviewers. Please do so. It's a challenge to find reviewers, and you may know somebody who really likes that subject area, has worked in it, and may be perfect. If you can add that, that very much helps the review process. When in doubt, go to one of the systematic kind of review formats that Mr. Data shared, Dr. Data shared with us in his last presentation. Saying that about the systematic process of working through, if, however, you have interest, you are reviewing the project and you don't have time to be thorough, but you have a couple of really clear, strong points that you've seen in the piece, instead of disregarding it, I will always like to hear from you. Even if you've just got 1, 2, or 3 lines, I may get back to you and ask for more information about the reviews. Often in this role, there are people who do a thorough job, a lot of detail, and others who just have 5 or 6 lines. But the 5 or 6 lines can actually go to the heart of major revision issues more deeply than the long. So if you only have a little bit of time to open it up, take a quick look at it, glance through, make a couple remarks, that can often be quite helpful. If it's not enough, I might need to go to it, but those few remarks can help. If you're new to the journal, go to the instruction for authors. They'll tell you something about what the journal prefers, what the journal likes. This page here is from our IFAs, as we call it. And so you see that if you're looking at a controlled trial of acupuncture, we'd like you to be working with the strict to check the guideline. So that's the standard we'd like you to be working to. I would like to say that we always uphold the standard, and we don't, but it's a aspirational standard. But anyway, journals are different, and go look at their IFAs. If you see something first round and you are ready to accept it, I would say, please write why. My first response if somebody is that it's a trash review, that they didn't do anything but just say yes. I need to hear from you, or basically whatever you've done to lead to that accept is going to be disregarded. Share your reasons for accepting if you're going to do that. This idea of tough, it has to do with that idea of the alignment between what you say to the editor and what you say to the authors. There will be people who will say this, what a remarkable study, when what they've said to me is this can't go to publication. You know, your work is an essential part of the scientific endeavor. And what we want to see is the stimulation of collegial discourse. And that means finding a way to be in conflict and share that conflict. And if they want to come back and say, you know, I disagree with the harshness, this is what it's about, then you deal with it in the review process. So the more you can be open directly with the authors, the better they'll be. You know, a principle here is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Nobody likes it when you come as, oh, you're looking well, terrific to see you, great work. And then you find out they've been telling somebody else they think you look like hell, and they think that the job that you're doing is horrendous. This happens in human discourse. It's good to keep it out of the review process. I personally think that if your expertise is limited, but you're curious and would like to review, this is partly because of the hunger to find good reviewers. Just in your notes to the editor, share, and you can share this with the author also. Say, I have limits in this area. Just be straightforward. If you've gone through and you've said it looks good, but I don't really understand the statistics, then it's a good idea to point that out, that you can't speak for that part of the study. Something's not quite right. Share that also in your notes. It gives an editor guidance about something to, you know, there's a thing called a smell test that's really, you just get a sense sometimes that something's a little off. Share it. It's helpful. And the other thing is, if you like the review and you'd like to review more, you know, let me know, let the editor know, and let them know what your featured areas are for work. And back to you. We're all looking for reviewers all the time. I've found, by the way, that a particularly good reviewer is a recently retired person who is trying to hold off Alzheimer's, not through doing crossword puzzles, but by doing peer review and keeping their mind active that way. So a piece fascinating actually is when you have two well respected reviewers, you might know, you can tell the quality of the review, and they come to very, very different outcomes. One will reject, another will say only minor revisions, and you go, what the heck am I going to do here? What I will frequently do is send, let's say that you've said minor revision, I might take the content of the reject reviewer and send it to you. What do you think about that? Does it change your view of the paper? And do the opposite to the other reviewer. So it's all blinded. You don't know who you are, but it can help sort out. And again, it may be a process that I've created to overcome some of my deficits in this position. But it's a fascinating process. Can have very different responses to the same piece. I do want to underscore the point that Dr. Data said in his last speech, our last talk was, if you are saying yes, you need to be in for the long run. Reviewers who disappear and don't re-review are very damaging to the process. If you have to invite new reviewers in partway through, it's not any fun for anybody. So stay in for the process. Let me see. Again, I just want to underscore, if you don't know this, it's to me quite remarkable the extent to which the science we publish is enhanced in the review process. You just can't underscore how important the intention of other eyes, great research gate 43s, will publish, will give you something, and there will be holes in it. Your eyes are very, very important to pointing out those holes, even if you happen to know the person who's the author of the paper or the team is a terrific one that you respect. The holes can be huge. So I have two last slides here, and they're general comments. Unstable. I hope it's been okay through the process.
Yeah, it's fine.
And this perhaps speaks more to India. In my experience of and these are a couple of comments I pulled from a manuscript. Sometimes in building a case, and this is important for reviewers and authors, cite the historic or traditional texts. And it's good to do that, but it's also good to be very clear in the paper itself that you know the difference between a citation from a historic text and one that's from modern research. So bring it out and point it out. As a reviewer, make sure that you're looking for that and making sure that they are pointing that out. Because in fact, what we're involved in, that principally has to do with modern research, right? Perhaps because of the depth and richness of your tradition, a lot of times your authors, and I think the reviewers will miss this, people will make assertions because you know its value. And so as you're reviewing, if a person says anything in the introduction, if they say, oh, this is of great historic use, it's been used for millennia, there should be a traditional text reference there. You just can't be saying things without the references. And this was a piece that was actually a very well-regarded team. And there were statements again that were coming in without reference or justification. In the discussion, in the conclusion, in the introduction, all of it needs to be backed up if you're making any level of claim of value. My last slide here is going a little bit afield, but it speaks to this world that many of us are in, who are in the traditional complementary and integrative is that we're both researchers, and many people have a sense of adequacy, that they think the healthcare system will be better if there is a better integration, if there's more utilization of natural medicines. The researcher by nature will say advocacy is not my job. I need to pull back and really be just looking at everything from the perspective of, does it meet science? Yes, indeed, in the process of the journal's core business, that's important. What we've realized, and a group of us have done a series of presentations that I note here, the one at the Congress on Integrative Medicine and Health was canceled because of COVID, but they've been panel discussions in part because we realize that in the dialogue, there's often a lot of antagonism, name calling, etc. That we've realized it's important for us to stick up for the science. If you understand the difference, it's not advocating for Ayurveda. Ayurveda is great. My grandmother used it. It's great. It's terrific. But it's to say we do have science. This is not an unscientific discipline. And when somebody starts taking you on, is figuring out there's a job. And I would say, as a scientist, to advocate for the right application of that science in public policy. It's not something that most researchers do, but we're urging people more to come forward and stand up for the science in our fields. And that means knowing it, and that means respect where we wish we had more science. So that's the end of my remarks. I would definitely, I don't know what I've done with the time. I often go over.
That's all.
Let me know.
We are in time. So I have one quick question and one quick comment. The question is that, do you have any for speaking from Journal of Complementary and Alternative Medicine, do you have any strategies for quick and good peer review, specifically for JCAM? From JCAM experience, do you have anything to say for quick and expedite review in certain cases?
I missed it.
Expedite review. Yeah.
So obviously with COVID, that issue of expedited review has, in the beginning in particular, was very strong. Now that we're realizing that COVID is going to be part of our lives for a long time, and we're not going to be seeing quick fixes, then it feels like there's less pressure expedite than there was when we were really in a time of total uncertainty. But what I would tell you is we definitely, with COVID, we're definitely trying to move things through. That being said, we run into barriers, and you expedite a paper that has holes in it, that doesn't merit publication without perhaps a series of re-reviews. But anyway, we definitely have a process, and what you need to do is in your cover note, just let us know you'd like it to be expedited, and let us know why the expediting is important. I know sometimes you want it for your thesis and to get your degrees, and we can try to respond to that. I think we're more likely to respond to a COVID paper with expediting it. But what I will say is I'm comfortable hearing from people who are getting antsy. Don't do it too much, but if you want something moved forward, let us know. Let me know your intention.
Sure. Yeah. And another thing is that I think Dr. Datta got one more point from your talk to add in his slide for what is the benefit for the reviewers. It's that you will prevent dementia or Alzheimer's if you're a reviewer. There are high chances that you will not land up into it.
Yes, that's right.
That was very nice. That was really good. So we will move on. Rest of the questions we will
for you editors, I really.
Yes, yes. So for
Okay.
like other things,
Very
other
good.
questions and comments, we will take up in panel discussion. We will be having all the speakers. I should also thank. I want to thank Mr. Weeks for being up early in the morning. It's 3 a.m. in Seattle, Washington. So I'm very thankful to you, sir. So we'll move on, and I hand over the baton to Kishore again and to take it forward.
Very good.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ashwini. So our next speaker in today's event is Professor Piyush Sahni. Professor Piyush Sahni currently works for the Department of Gastrointestinal Surgery, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi. He is also the president of Indian Association of Medical Journal Editors, IAMJE, and is an active member of WAME. WAME stands for World Association of Medical Editors, where he plays vital roles in different committees and boards, such as the Educational Committee, International Advisory Group of E-Learning Program, Membership Committee, and also in the Ethics and Policy Committees. He is currently the editor of the National Medical Journal of India. And in this talk today, he will lay his emphasis on trust in peer review. Why should the peer review be trusted, and how this trust can be enhanced? So he will especially touch upon the topics like ethics in peer review, conflict of interest, and how to flag the misconduct, and also when to say no to peer review request, and also about the role of different stakeholders in peer review. So I request Professor Piyush Sahni to take over and deliver his talk. Professor Piyush.
Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to speak to all of you. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes, sir.
I'll share my screen, and I intend to do less talking than I have been asked to, because I think we're running far behind schedule. So what I've been asked to do is to talk about trust in the peer review process. One of the things that's happened in the past decade or so is the emergence of journals that we initially used to call predatory journals, and now people prefer to call pseudo journals. And essentially, these journals, these predatory journals or the pseudo journals, violate one basic principle on which scholarly scientific publishing happens, and that's the process of peer review. So these journals bypass or subvert the process of peer review, and therefore a lot of people prefer to call them pseudo journals. Of course, one of the reasons they're called predatory journals is that there is a financial profit element that they're looking at all the time. As mentioned just now, these are my tasks. I need to talk a little bit about ethics in peer review. Conflict of interest in peer review. There's conflict of interest in a lot of other walks of life, as well as in publishing, as well as in doing research. But my focus is going to be conflict of interest in peer review. How should we flag misconduct? That's easy. You look, you suspect, and if you suspect, you flag it. You don't hesitate to flag it. When to say no to a review request, and finally, the role of stakeholders, and try and touch upon who are these stakeholders and what is their role and interest in the peer review process. I'm sorry I missed listening to the initial few talks, and I presume Dr. Pai and Dr. Datta would have already covered some of the issues related to the process of peer review and the history of peer review. But what one wants from a peer review process is something which is fair, timely, and unbiased. And that's the cornerstone of the process of peer review. So what we need to do and ensure that our reviewers do is provide us a fair review, a timely review, and an unbiased review. If they weren't doing any of these, then obviously they were violating the whole process of peer review. Science depends largely on people to review stuff, look at what has come out, and then decide whether or not to publish. One of the reasons people don't like the process of peer review is that it delays publication. And the reason it delays publication is the person who's asked to review this, person who's asked to review a paper has to spend time, effort, and provide a review within a certain period of time. Now, if this process did not happen in the manner it was supposed to happen, then there could be an intentional or an unintentional delay in the publication of that piece of science. It's well known that if you are too far ahead of your times, it's often difficult to publish. Whether it was Lister, whether it was Pascal, all of them were ahead of their times. And they initially did what today would be called writing a blog. Well, they didn't have the electronic medium, so they went ahead and they published their own small little papers on pieces of paper and circulated amongst their friends or amongst members of the Royal Society of one or the other country. But essentially what was being done was a process of peer review was being sought, and a process which allowed people to look beyond what was generally acceptable was being pursued. So the reason why we need a system which is fair, which is timely, and which is unbiased is to ensure that what goes out into the public domain, what you and I read, is based on some amount of trust. Trust in the system of peer review, where a reviewer with a certain expertise in the subject has looked at a paper carefully, spent time on that paper, not flipped through the paper and then given a cursory opinion, but looked through the paper carefully. If necessary, sought the opinion of a colleague who understood more than what this person understood after informing the editor and getting the permission of the editor, and then providing comments which were useful in improving the paper. Constructive criticism is what is needed. Conflict of interest is the second thing that I need to address in relation to peer review. Now, conflicts of interest, irrespective of who has these conflicts of interest, could very broadly in the scientific circles be divided into three broad groups. There could be academic conflicts of interest. I could get a paper to review for the reason that the group which has sent the paper in for publishing has gone ahead of me. And I could be somebody who was competing with them to be the first in the world to publish something. So I could be working in a cutting edge area, and this would therefore be an academic conflict of interest. Wanting to be first or wanting to be ahead of a colleague, a peer, a contemporary who's also working in the same field. I could have a personal conflict of interest. You could send me a paper of a person whom I do not like. And you should say, well, scientifically, you should be able to assess the paper irrespective of whether or not you like the person. It's very difficult to do that. When two people meet, one person likes the other person doesn't like the other person. So there are four people, there will always be three different opinions. If there are five people, there will be four different opinions, maybe five different opinions. So there could be a personal conflict of interest. There could be a difference of opinion with the person. And that is something that one needs to be aware of. If you're aware that the person whose paper you've been asked to review is someone you do not like or someone you like too much, then you need to inform the editor that you have a personal conflict of interest and ensure that you get the editor's okay before you go ahead and provide that review. Finally, there could be a financial conflict of interest. I could be reviewing a paper which might challenge something that I had published. The reason the paper came to me because I was an expert in the area, and I get a financial benefit out of what I had published. Now, if this paper were to go out into the public domain, I could possibly lose financially. And that could therefore be a financial conflict of interest, which could influence me. All these conflicts of interest need to be declared to the editor. Most good journals would ask reviewers on a regular basis to declare their conflicts of interest. Some journals would not, but that doesn't mean it prevents a reviewer from going ahead and declaring his or her conflicts of interest. And a good reviewer would do that. Interestingly, I know of journals who would ask such reviewers who have declared a conflict of interest to actually provide an opinion only because this might be a good critique of the paper. But that's something that we could debate about. How should I flag misconduct? First, I need to look for and decide that there is misconduct. As a reviewer, is it my job to look for misconduct? No, not really. My job is to look at the quality of the paper. In the process of reviewing the paper, if I go looking for information and I find something interesting which suggests that there could be misconduct in the form of plagiarism, misconduct in the form of duplicate publication, misconduct in the form of a conflict of interest, or misconduct in the form of fraud, all these would need to be brought to the attention of the editor. To say this is not my job, even though I know that there could be a possible conflict of interest, a possible misconduct, doesn't mean that I should not inform the editor. So flagging misconduct is easy. Once you know there is misconduct, you need to just flag it. You need to tell the editor. A lot of reviewers would hesitate to do this. I'm not sure whether there is misconduct or not. Doesn't matter. It's for the editor to decide whether there is or there is not, whether there is a need for an investigation or not. It's your job to say if you feel that there is a misconduct, a potential misconduct that you see. How do you say no and why do you say? Saying no is easy. Just say no. I'm sorry, I can't review a paper. But when should I say no? If you don't have the time to do a review, remember the researcher who's put in hours and hours and weeks and weeks and days and months has spent a lot of time on this piece of work, which is now in front of you, which you have to sit in judgment on to some extent. If you do not give the time it deserves, that's unfair to the person who is the researcher. Now, when you send off your paper for review, would expect the reviewer to spend time to try and understand your paper and give you a fair hearing. Now, that fair hearing requires time, and you should not forget that you should do to others what you would want done to yourself. And therefore, if you want your paper to be reviewed well by a reviewer to spend time on it, then please, if you are asked to review a paper, please do spend time on it. If you receive a paper which is not in your field of interest, please return it. Say, no, I'm sorry, this is not something that I can provide expert opinion on. Or sometimes you would know the person whose paper comes to you. Before you go ahead and review the paper, please tell the editor that, look, I know this person and therefore it's possible my review may not be unbiased. I could provide you a biased review. And therefore, I would much rather say no. There would be instances where the editor would say, I still need your opinion. Well, you go ahead and provide the opinion in the knowledge that the editor is aware of what you've said. Lastly, stakeholders. So who are the stakeholders? Well, the biggest stakeholders are the authors because they want their papers published. And who's standing between them and publication is the reviewers and the editors. But the editors too are stakeholders. They need to get good science into their journals. They need to develop a trust in their peer review system for authors to submit papers to them for publication. And therefore, both editors and authors have a significant interest in getting a good peer review system going. The better the peer review system, the better the trust in the peer review system. The more transparent the peer review system, the better the trust in the peer review system. And therefore, in the end, it's absolutely necessary that we have trust in the peer review system. I'm going to end here and say that use peer review and use it to the best of your ability to get the best science to publish. Ethical issues are important in all walks of life and much more important in peer review, especially in healthcare. Not as much as in other fields. No, certainly not. It's much more as in other fields, because here what you publish could actually influence the outcome of a person's illness. And that's something, it's life that you're dealing with, and therefore ethical issues are extremely important. Now, you could be an early career reviewer and may not be aware of all the issues involved. So be aware, but more importantly, once you're aware, don't ignore. Don't ignore the ethical issues that go around the process of peer review. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot, sir. Thanks a lot for those words of insight, where you shared the explanation regarding the conflict of interest and the stakeholders and so on. One question that I had in my mind is that you mentioned about pseudo journals. Sometimes, very rarely, I receive some reviewer invitation from a pseudo journal which is known for its pseudo nature. So should I be accepting to review for such journals as a reviewer?
So if you accept a bribe, you're as culpable as the person who's giving you the bribe. So that's the analogy that I would use to say, if you accept to review for a pseudo journal, then you're part and parcel of that whole process.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for such clear explanation and conviction, full of conviction. Thank you, sir. So we will move ahead with the panel discussion, and the rest of the questions will be taken up during the panel discussion. Is that fine, sir? So in the panel discussion, our panelists experts who have delivered their talks will be the panelists. Along with them, we have some special invitees also. One of them is Dr. Monica Mule, who got her first paper published with JIM. So we will be asking the experiences as an author from her in the discussion that is going to start in a short while from now. There is Professor Subhashan Lakhotia, who will be also a part of panel. He is a professor in the Department of Zoology. He's distinguished professor in Banaras Hindu University. Mr. John Weeks will also be there as a panelist. We have Professor Bhushan Patwardhan, Vice Chairman UGC, and also the founding editor of the Journal of Ayurveda and Integrative Medicine with us. We have Ms. Surabhi, who is the publisher, who will be speaking the perspectives from the publisher point of view, and also all the other expert invited experts will also be the part of this panel. So let me start with the introduction of one of the panelists today, Vaidya Monica Mule. Vaidya Monica Mule currently works as consultant Ayurvedic physician at State Tarachand Ramanath Charitable Hospital, Pune, and works as a lecturer at Tilak Ayurveda Mahavidyalaya, Pune, Maharashtra. She not only holds, I think there is some disturbance. Audio disturbance. Can someone fix this?
Okay. Your voice is not coming.
Yeah. Am I audible now? I think there is some problem with the audio, with the delay.
Yes, sir.
I think there is some problem with your audio. Please look into it. Yeah, I was introducing Dr. Mule. Basically, she's an Ayurvedic doctor. She holds JMS, MD, and PhD degree. She also has completed her BA and MA in Sanskrit, and her topic of her Panchakarma PhD was on evaluation of Vardhamana Snehapana in healthy individuals, and also
Disturbance is quite a lot. I think we'll have to do
yeah.
something. Manager?
Hello. Yeah, there is some problem with audio.
The voice disturbance is due to Dr. Monica Mole's cell, because once I unmute her, then the noise stops. Dr. Monica, can you please check at your end?
Okay.
Yeah. Dr. Monica, please log out and log in again if you can.
May I request Dr. Ashwini to introduce other panelists?
Yeah. So I have a pleasure to introduce Lakhotia sir. So Professor S.C. Lakhotia is a distinguished professor in Banaras Hindu University, India, and he is GST Sub Distinguished Fellow. sir is very senior. He started his work, and largely his work is in Drosophila, using Drosophila, the fruit fly, uh, as a model system for his work, and his work spans really a large area of biology research, starting from RNA binding proteins to non-coding RNAs, to a lot of interesting aspects of stress biology, and now a very relevant research which is in Ayurveda biology. Lakhotia sir has published in field of Ayurveda. He's largely published in field of RNA biology, and now published also in field of Ayurveda biology with interesting papers on Amalaki Rasayana and Rasa Sindhura. So sir has 160 research, more than 160 research papers, and he has guided many PhD scholars. And I think he has a lot of interesting views about integrative science, health sciences, and its research in research with all of us. Looking forward to interact with you more, sir. And the another guest in our panel is Ms. Surabhi Shukla. She is the executive publisher of Elsevier Health and Medical Science Journals in New Delhi, India office. She specifically handles JIM with Elsevier for last 5 years, and she has 15 years long publication experience in publication industry, micro health publications and water clover, and also Springer Nature publications. So with she will provide insights to us from her publication experience as a publisher. Thank you for being on the panel, Mr. Ravi.
Yeah, uh, I'm glad to introduce Professor Bhushan Patwardhan, who of course doesn't need any introduction, but as a formality, I'm going to introduce him. Professor Bhushan Patwardhan, uh, professor and former director, Interdisciplinary School of Health Sciences, Savitribai Phule, Pune University, presently holds the position of the Vice Chairman, University Grants Commission, New Delhi. He is originally a biomedical scientist and is a fellow of National Academy of Sciences and also the fellow of National Academy of Medical Sciences, India. Currently, he holds additional responsibilities such as the chairman of Indian Council of Social Science Research and also the member of National Board of Examination. He has worked on boards of several universities and has contributed as a member of important national committees of UGC, CSIR, DST, DBT, CCRAS, and ICMR, and so on. Dr. Bhushan has worked on several policy making committees and task forces of National Knowledge Commission, Planning Commission, Niti Aayog, and also of Ministry of Ayush. His pioneering work on novel concepts such as therapeutic adjuvants, Ayusoft, Ayugenomics, reverse pharmacology, network pharmacology are widely recognized. He is the founder editor in chief of Journal of Ayurveda and Integrative Medicine and is on editorial boards of many reputed journals as well. He is the recipient of many orations and awards, including Sri Ramnath Chopra Oration, Hafkin Oration, Dr. C. Dwarkanath Oration, P.K. Devi Oration, V.K. Jog Best Teacher Award, and so on. His recent scholarly books, Integrative Approaches for Health and Innovative Approaches to Drug Discovery, have received excellent reviews. His worldview article on predatory journals published in Nature has been widely appreciated. It is noteworthy that his 20 articles have been cited more than 100 times, and he has received several research grants and has guided 20 PhD students and holds 8 Indian patents, 2 US patents with over 8,500 citations. I welcome you, sir, and maybe I request the panelists to answer the questions that we are going to put forward. Maybe if Dr. Monica Mule has joined, I can start with her. Dr. Monica, your audio is still problematic.
Am I audible now?
No, there is a lot of disturbance.
What we can do is that instead of earphones, if you directly join with the system's audio, I think it will be good.
Maybe she can join with her phone
Yeah.
directly. That is better, I think.
Okay.
Dr. Mule.
Now,
Yeah, now it's
yeah.
perfect.
Can
Better.
you
Yeah,
hear
now,
me?
Yeah.
Yes.
yeah, now it is
Okay.
sorted. Yeah.
Okay.
So the first question
Yes.
goes to Dr. Monica Mule. So you are a practitioner fundamentally and a teacher. So what made you, a clinician, publish your results in the form of a research paper? What advantages and incentives did you get after publishing your paper? And what new skill sets did you acquire when you underwent the transformation from a clinician practitioner to an author by publishing your first paper with JIM? So we want to know your experiences basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, I have been writing different classical Ayurvedic articles for many years in Hindi, English, and Marathi, but not in peer review journal. When I completed my PhD 2, 3 years back, and then I wrote my first article, first research article regarding Snehapana, which is Ayurvedic classical concept and its relation to lipid profile. It was part of my PhD thesis. When I wrote this article, I was pretty confident that it may take 2 revisions and my paper will be would be accepted. But I have to attend 4 to 5 revisions, and these revisions definitely changed my attitude of writing, attitude of thinking. So these writing process or revision process rather all the reviewers uh, they helped me. So this process encouraged me, and of course after that when I started reviewing paper, it helped me a lot. When I got 3 to 4 revisions from reviewers, their different thought process which I came to know, and this evolved me a lot as a author and as a reviewer. uh, One more thing I want to share. We have an verse, Atmavat Satatam Pashet. So when we see this paper as if our own paper, then we can do a good review. So we can think in all possible ways, in all possible perspectives to that paper when we are reviewing. As first I was author, and then I have now become a reviewer. So in both the process, if you treat the paper as if your own, then you can review much better. Another thing I want to share, when we are reviewing a paper, first I am an author, then I am a reviewer, and while reviewing paper, uh, there are 2 to 3 reviewers or 4 to 5 reviewers, and we the editor is sharing different reviewers comments with each reviewer, other reviewers. So there is a lot of give and take knowledge from other reviewers. So if someone is statistician, someone is a clinical say pharmacologist or some cytologist, then we can understand the different concept of that field also. So this is a sort of interdisciplinary research, and there is give and take relationship. And with this process, uh, there is benefit to author also and as a reviewer also. So reviewing a paper is again a continuous learning process, and for me it is very encouraging, and I am thankful to ZIM for giving me opportunity as I'm an author, but also for reviewing the different panchakarma papers which I am from that particular field. And I'm also thankful for giving me this opportunity to share my experience as an author and reviewer. So Dr. Kishore, I think I have given an answer for your doubt.
Yes. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Dr. Ashwini.
Yes, some of these questions which we are asking are specific to a panelist, but some of those are actually quite general questions to everybody on the panel. So please let us know if you would have a comment or any view on the question or the query or the point which we are raising. So next question we want Professor Lakhotia, hits specific to him. What established actually a very motivated established geneticists or biologists to move to a field of Ayurveda, which is actually interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary kind of field of Ayurveda biology.
This is, thanks, this is a very interesting question. Since my childhood, I have been exposed to traditional medicine, homeopathy, Ayurveda, and so on and so forth. And I wanted to be a medical person, but then education proved difficult. I took the basic science, and I got interested in gene expression and genetics, and that's what I went on. Then in 2003, 4, 5, when Professor Vidyathan wrote about Ayurvedic biology, and then when he started this coordinated kind of project in Ayurvedic biology, he called me and wanted me to suggest some research in BHU who can be part of it. And in that process, I offered myself. Being involved in looking at neurodegeneration diseases in the fly model, I thought this could be a very good system to look at the way Ayurvedic formulations, rasayanas, and others can act upon. And having a good understanding and the good resources in Drosophila, I offered. Initially, the community thought it was a weird idea. How can a fly with a no with a fly can do anything in Ayurveda? But I think what we could convince and what we it has learned is that in the process, I learned the basic philosophy of Ayurveda and applying the rigor of modern science. I have been, our group has been able to contribute something. And I think one of the things that we are now trying to do is induce more and more scientists to look at standard Ayurvedic formulation rather than on active principles, which is what has gone on in a large number, that people are look for active principles in herbs and so on and so forth. I think that's a wrong approach. We need to take a holistic way of looking at it. And the other thing that I've been trying to, I'm now trying to propagate is that we need not have distinction between traditional and modern medicine. Both are directed to the same end point of view, the patient, the human suffering. And I think there are very complementary ways of doing things. Diagnostics is one part, holistic way of looking at life and looking at the mechanism. And so we need enormous amount of pure, unbiased research, scientific research in Ayurveda. That's the way I got into it.
Yeah. Do you think it needs a lot of open-mindedness to actually say that we can apply modern biology techniques and the concepts from the, traditional medicine like Ayurveda together and can come up with something which will add value in healthcare
Yes,
and health
yes.
science?
I think it needs an open mind on both sides. On the more on the Ayurvedic community, they need to, as I've often put it very bluntly, they need to come out of their shell. They shouldn't think that what was stated 3,000 years ago, which was a remarkable thing, what Charak and Shushruta had done, but times have changed and we need to re-examine them and re-examine them in the way we understand life and matter today. And that's where the Ayurvedic community needs to have a change of mind. And the modern biologists, modern scientists, modern medicine people also shed their kind of contempt for traditional medicine. I use this word contempt because that's what very often we say, okay, that's evidence less. We need to converge experience and evidence together to bring in, and that's where many journals can do something remarkable. I'm happy that I've been asked to write some editorials on this, but then when I look at the manuscripts that come from some of the journals, they look very poor. And I feel sad that they get published also, because again, the Ayurvedic community thinks, well, what are scientists to do with it? This is something established. I think that's where we need a good dialogue and a good understanding. And peer reviewers can do a lot in that process.
So anybody else has any point to make here? Otherwise, Kishore, we can move with the.
Yeah. Yeah, my next question is to Mr. John Weeks, because he has been handling a journal, interdisciplinary journal, where he receives papers from different streams of traditional medicine, maybe traditional medicine of Chinese traditional medicine, Ayurveda, yoga, and so many different disciplines across the world. So I would like to know whether your experiences of handling Ayush papers, is it different from the experiences of handling other traditional um, medicine papers, like maybe traditional Chinese medicine? So maybe in terms of scientific rigor or language or presentation, or or maybe even the reviewer's response and author's response, do they vary based on the discipline? So this is the question that I would like to ask to Mr. John Weeks, sir.
So I'm I hope that I'm coming through. My internet connection is challenging here.
You're
It's
on.
it's coming through. Okay. I would say, you know, one of the things we see from China a lot is systematic reviews. We just a tremendous number of them, and that speaks to the other research that is informing the systematic review. So there's a, you know, there's I think a maturity and a length of investment there that it doesn't feel as strong. I mean, I'm not an expert in studying either of your systems. In general, I think that the research infrastructure in specifically it just is more, feels to be more robust, and therefore, you know, the movement of biomedical science is from multiple controlled trials to systematic review to inclusion and policy, and that's it's just much. They have a whole industry of systematic review people at places like the Beijing University of Chinese Medicine. So a general comment in this area with Jack, because we get, you know, a lot of papers from Iran, from India, from China, and is choosing which of the papers are good for the global audience and which of them are best, perhaps in your case, in an Ayurvedic journal or in a homeopathy journal. And I wish I could tell you that we have set clear standards for why we make the decisions that we do, but we don't have such standards. But it's something with, particularly with, you know, our submissions going up, and you know, we're not open access and we're limited in the number of papers that we can publish. So I think that's probably plenty. I mean, I talked to this a little bit at the end of my talk. I think there tends to be more, we get more, somebody you can feel the excitement of submitting a research piece, which is full. But inside that, often there will not be, as clear of a distinction between where the basis of the evidence is, and the need to always reference any claims. So I hope that's useful.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
So the next question is actually, first we would ask Bhushan Patwardhan sir, but I think Dr. Datta or anybody, Dr. Sahani, if they would like to answer this, please, or Dr. Pai. So if has pandemic exposed any flip side of evidence, sticking to evidence-based scientific publishing? This pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, has it exposed any flip side of sticking to evidence-based publishing? So, the Bhushan sir?
No, let the others say,
I think a lot of journals would have seen that there's been a pandemic of submissions as well. So it's not been only pandemic of thing, but hurried science is always not good science. And we've had some, there's been a drop of quality. There's also been a phenomena where probably in the initial periods of the lockdown, there were a lot of people with holding on to data and they have gathered that and now submitted. So it is not necessarily linked to COVID related research, but the number of submissions went up drastically. Having said that, I will not equate that with better quality, but definitely the number of submissions went up. I want
No,
to
but sticking only to the evidence-based publication, evidence. So asking that
we are
strong
not
enough.
getting good evidence papers in COVID yet. At least we are not. It's mostly surveys. It's a lot of survey-based driven or some reports here or there, some case reports. It's not really very high level evidence that we've got.
Do you also find this in any other field, not COVID, but any other field that also you can explain if you find that because there is such a strong unmet medical need that you people will tend to publish more and unhurriedly into it.
I think we had to be more cautious. And in fact, for certain people who had tall claims, we've asked them, it's not validated, it's not research. Our peer reviews also were under a lot of pressure to do it fast. But we tend to slow down things because in the rush of publishing, we should not publish something wrong. At the same time, admittedly, the number of there's a tsunami of submissions. I think we did try to rush up our reviewers at certain times. But as I have recommended a couple of people to just limit themselves to correspondences or letters to the editor in case they felt very strongly about a particular thing, but not give it the status of a original article.
May I
Can I
say
make a
something?
comment?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah,
See,
Lakhotia, sir.
in the context of pandemic, COVID pandemic, and Ayurveda particularly, this has been true with modern medicine, but Ayurveda also there have been lots of claims, manuscripts writing that they have this tradition, this medicine, or this treatment, and so on, but hardly any evidence based. And I think that's what we need to be very, very careful, that there can be tendencies, there can be possibilities, but to make a conclusion, during last few months when I've reviewed several papers, people write reviews that, okay, Ayurveda offers this, and cite something little without any evidence. And my worry is if that review gets published, next time nobody will go to ask any original data. They will simply say, okay, this has been put in review and therefore accepted. And I think as editors and reviewers, we need to be very, very careful about this. Because in the long run, this can be not only damaging for the health point of view, but also damaging to the subject. And I think as an outsider, I'm not in the Ayurveda field, but as a basic scientist trying to do good science and to be a reasonably good reviewer, we must be careful about this. this particular point, that there's no need to rush things because there's a pandemic, and therefore, you see, the quick review, as Dr. Datta also said, can have serious damaging consequences sometimes. We need time to look at it, examine it, and editors also must not be to be the first to publish something and then regret later on. That's the way I would look at it.
May I
Yeah,
say something?
Ashwini, let me continue what Dr. Lakotia was telling, See, review has to be authoritative. To write a review, the authors of the review must have worked in that field and they should have really earned that reputation and authority to write review. Tendency just to write review by picking up information from here and there and compiling it, such kind of reviews are really damaging what Dr. Lakotia was actually mentioning. So whether a narrative review or systematic review, if it is best, but to write a review, you have to have content. From where are you going to get content of published literature if people have not worked on it, not published? So just merely speculative reviews are not really something which any journal should really encourage. And reviewers also, if they find that such speculative reviews are there, they should not encourage, and publishers also should be very, very careful. Reviews are important, but the purpose of review, we have to understand and meet that purpose first.
Sure. Dr.
May I
Pai?
say something? Yeah. I was going to say just what Dr. Patwardhan and Dr. Lakotia said. We've got a lot of review articles of late. I've rejected almost every one of them because it just adds what is being published in the newspapers. They pick that data up and try to submit it as review articles. But one other point I wanted to make was, while we do not rush, well, at least I as an editor do not rush to accept a paper based on COVID. Once I accept it, I rush to put it online ahead of print. There's no point accepting a paper on COVID today and publishing it 8 months down the line. So since we do have an online ahead of print, I jump the queue out here. COVID papers get published before non-COVID papers. And I think nobody's going to object to that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
The
a very
standards
good
have to be the same, or maybe even more strict than for other papers, in fact.
Yeah. Okay. Very nice. Yeah, so Ms. Weeks, you have a point, please?
I just want to, this, if I might add, this has been, I would say, as an editor to deal with COVID, it's been fascinating. Just two quick stories. One is that with the paper from Dr. Patwardhan, we actually made a mistake in a headline of a media release. The authors had been very clear to be more limited in what they said they were doing. And I didn't review the communications department's media release well enough. And so the headlines seemed to claim others did. And we got some pushback for that. And it wasn't a fault of the paper. It was the fault of our communications department. The other is with the, let's giving China as an example with the news that 92% of the people were using some TCM. We chose to publish an early review article that, we could have gone either way on it. It was from a very good review team out of Europe, reviewing all the evidence on TCM for COVID. And at that point, which was mid-May, there wasn't an evidence base to be making the claims there. Now, partly that was a temporal issue. So the decision to publish something in May that then part of the global information that has a negative finding, it might not have been a good editorial decision, but at that point, it did seem it was important to say, listen, hold on, we don't have good evidence yet. evidence that something is good with something is good with COVID. And many writers have failed to make that distinction.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Sure, yeah. A lot of good
Yeah.
response. A lot of answers.
So my next question is to Ms. Surabhi. She happens to be the executive publisher for Elsevier. So I want to know the views from a publisher point of view. So why is it important to subject any submission to a rigorous peer review? How does it matter to a publisher? This is my question. Yeah.
Thank you for the question. So from a publisher's perspective, and which is the same as the editor's perspective, which we have already heard today, the purpose of peer review is to provide researchers with an established process for improving, validating, registering, and preserving their work. Peer review ensures that only the best quality papers are selected for publication, and not only that, the previous work is acknowledged. So it is only through the process of peer review that fraud and plagiarism can be detected. So in the current age of software detection of plagiarism, one of the very common questions that I get is, do you still think that the importance of peer review exists? And my answer is yes. Not only does it exist, I would say it has become much, much more important. Just as the softwares get more sophisticated at catching plagiarism, so do people at fooling them. So in fact, they're getting even, everyone is getting better. The fooling, the ones who are trying to fool, and of course the softwares. So the only way we can really trust the publication is through peer review. Why? Because it is only reviewers who can identify concerns with the manuscript, such as mistakes in methodology, lack of originality, if there are conclusions which are not supported by the results obtained, if there are any omissions in the reference list. So whether it is sound science or not is not going to be something that a software can detect, neither now nor in 10, 15, 20 years from now. It has to be someone who's a subject matter expert as far as the sound subject knowledge is concerned, and peer review is unparalleled in that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot. Uh, I come back to Dr. Monica Mule. You must have observed there was a slide, a cartoon shown by, I think, Dr. Sanjay in his presentation. They before the peer review, how the manuscript looked like, and after it got published, how it got metamorphosed into something else. So, Dr. Monica, would you like to share your experiences of how much is your published version of manuscript different from the one that you submitted? So, did you experience the hand-holding approach by the reviewers?
Yes. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yes. Yes, definitely. Uh, uh, as I have said, I was pretty confident that there might require 2 to 3 revisions, but it take 5 to 6 revisions. And after that, my weak paper becomes strong. During this, statistician helped me a lot regarding constructing proper data, or again arranging my 30 candidates were there, but they helped me a lot to arrange the data again with their different perspective, which I was not able to put forth. This gives a better look to my paper, because they have arranged my data in different with different aspect, and there are different graphics they added, and this gives a better look or a better idea of my concept of sneha pan and its effect on lipid profile. Secondly, they helped me a lot regarding the proper construction of the paper. Though I have written it very sincerely and with my hard work was there, but it should be very scientific construction of the paper. It is because of the reviewers only. So I thanked all the reviewers, especially for this scientific and constructive writing. They helped me in writing, in constructing graphics. They asked me to alter a lot regarding abstract, then some introduction, not in methodology, but proper abstract writing. I could understand with their guidance and suggestion. Because though I have written everything in my proper way, but the uh, appropriate scientific writing of the abstract, the precise writing of the paper, including methodology, material, then discussion. So these are the different points where they helped me to construct my paper. So I am very much thankful and rather grateful to all of the reviewers.
Maybe I would like to share my experience of handling a paper. Basically, I handled your paper as an associate editor. Maybe
Oh,
I should not disclose it, but still, I would like to disclose it because I have some important experience to share. In the initial process of review, for some 3 or 4 times or cycles of reviewing, I did not get the inputs that I expected from reviewers, and also from the author's end, the expected outcome was not visible. Then what I decided was to add one more reviewer after third or fourth revision. This we often do. As an editor, I did this, and that particular reviewer changed the entire shape of your paper.
yeah.
So all those the points that you mentioned, the redoing of statistics and introducing those figures were because of that one particular reviewer who was added after third or fourth revision. So sometimes we get such dedicated reviewers who help
Yeah.
the authors like you who are at the beginning stage at the in their career as authors. So they did this hand holding kind of thing, and then the present version of your paper got to this particular shape. So that's what I wanted to emphasize over here, that some good reviewers, one good reviewer can change the entire shape of the paper. So with this I continue.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Kishore.
So the next question from us is for Professor Lakhotia. Uh, Sir, what was your experience in while publishing in such a complex interdisciplinary area? Your perception and about what did you get, how the reviewer's attitude was, how did you get the comment, was the paper handled and such? Because it was a very first interdisciplinary kind of area, especially in Ayurveda biology.
Well, it has been a mixed experience that there were issues in pure scientists understanding the Ayurvedic principles and the Ayurvedic experts understanding how can Drosophila and what can cell studies and so on do this. But then, by and large, it has been a good experience. Most papers did go through 1 or 2 or 3 revisions, and in the process, obviously, they improved. The bad experience was with some of the journals, high sounding journals, high name journals. I don't believe in impact factor, but still, there we had some bad experience. Sometimes papers were written within 3 hours of submission, not suitable. Now, I think this, okay, editorial decisions have to be taken, but I think even the editorial decisions should take some time to look at it, think about it, instead of outright rejecting. The other the experience was, which was resolved, but that is a very valid basis, that when you work with residue containing mercury and show there is a positive effect, obviously eyebrows are raised because mercury is one of the most, and in the West particularly, where all the Ayurvedic preparations were at one time banned because of the heavy metals. And myself working on stress biology and heavy metals toxicity, I very well aware of it. And that was the reason why I chose to work on improve rust endurance in my study as to what it does. And then when we explain that it's a processing that makes it harmless, and that first we showed in Drosophila, then in a collaborative study with CCMB, we showed it in mouse. These concerns were always raised, but once we explained them that here this has happened, the papers went through. And so it has been a mixed experience, a learning process, that we had to learn the philosophy of Ayurveda. We had to learn that why we use certain, what is the processing part, and then from the basic science point of view, to convince the two I mean, this has also helped me as a peer reviewer sometimes, because I do get papers and then I have to think about it from the Ayurvedic perspective, as well as whether there's good evidence for it. And so this has been a good learning process overall.
So, my next question is to Ms. Surabhi. So, how does Elsevier or you look at rewarding the reviewers? Because reviewers are pressed for time, and so they are giving you time. So, what is your strategy on that? How to encourage or reward the reviewers as a
Thank you,
publisher?
Dr. So if we talk about specifically for rewards for reviewers, like Colonel Datta had also mentioned, Xavier gives 30-day free access to Scopus and Science Study to all the other reviewers for all our journals. That's a standard. Other than that, we also have Elsevier Reviewer Recognition Platform. And that's like a program which is there. So any person who's not even a reviewer can go and register themselves on this platform, create a personalized profile page. And as soon as they start reviewing, they start building up their CV. So it gives statistics. So your stats changed from not being a reviewer to a recognized reviewer. As do you do more, you get a statistics of an outstanding reviewer, which is the top 10 percentile of the journal. You get certificates, you get badges, which you can share on LinkedIn. You can download that as a PDF for grants. And this is not only for when you review Elsevier journals. You can also add your history of non-Elsevier journals. And this profile is updated automatically monthly as you review more. And other than that, the reviewers also get 10% discount on Elsevier web shop and 30% discount on Elsevier bookstores. Another thing which we have started only last year is that we also offer certified peer review course. So this is a self-learning course in the form of 3 hours of webinars, podcasts, and questionnaires. And you can do it at your desired speed. And you get a certificate at the end. This course is designed by specifically people from our Lancet cell as well as the subject experts. So we received over 15,000 signups in its first month itself. It's very hugely popular. I can share the links to this course and the review recognition platform as well.
Yeah, please. I think that will help, because most of our audience right now form part of JIM reviewers panel, and that's what will help the new reviewers who are coming up. I think that will be. Thank you.
You're not audible, Dr. Ashwini. Unmute yourself.
Yeah. So the next question is for Mr. John Weeks. Is that what do you feel any specific challenges when you send a paper to Ayush reviewer who is expert in Ayush, and then followed by that is a question for you and the Bhushan sir, and any also Pai sir, all of you can answer. If how do you deal with if there is conflict which arises from such interactions between the reviewer and the editor? Was I audible? Shall I repeat?
Yeah,
Do
you were.
yeah. Do you feel any specific?
If it was for me, it was too broken up for me.
Yeah. Okay. Am I okay now? Am I audible now? You?
Yes, I
Yes,
could hear, but the question was, I didn't know if it was for me because nobody spoke. I thought it was, but it was.
Dr. Ashwini, would you please
Yeah.
repeat the question?
Yeah, I will repeat. I'll break the questions into two parts. First one was for you, Mr. John Weeks, that do you face any particular problem or issues when you are dealing with reviewers from Ayush field of Ayush field is what the first part of the question was. So if you can answer that. You're mute. You're on mute. You have to.
Yes, I'm just saying the full question didn't come through again.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So I think I can stick to the second part of the question, and if required, I'll come back. So how do you handle reviewers and editors conflict? If there is a conflict between the reviewers and editors, how to handle it? Am I audible now?
This is breaking up. As how do I handle the reviewers and editors for, I don't, I'm sorry.
Conflicts. She was
Yeah,
asking about the conflicts, potential conflicts between,
Conflicts.
conflicts between reviewers and editors.
So, you know, as I've shared, and it may be, I may have a different strategy than some of you would recommend, but well, first, I have the perspective that the perspective of a person, a professional who has had a close relationship with an author can be very, very useful for an article getting better. That person with the conflict to announce it and say, I'm working with this person, another project. I worked with them on a separate project. I'm working in the same area. To me, the important thing is to know what the conflict is, so that can inform my evaluation of what they say. So I just, you know, it helps. It's, I find, I don't, but here in the US, the pool of reviewers who are very good is not that large. And so the chances of finding somebody who's a very good reviewer of a paper by a very good author is that there's a good chance that they know each other, that they've had a glass of wine together, that they've done something. So I work through these conflicts by just soliciting disclosure and then knowing in the way that it's good to know if a reviewer is a recommended reviewer. And they just have an asterisk. You think about it differently. I hope, hope that came through.
Yeah, I think it is okay. Anyone else? Dr. Pai,
actually,
Dr. Datta? Yeah, Professor Lakhotia? Yes.
It just reminded me to share a real story of 1950s when peer review didn't exist. This is an incident between two great geneticists, one very senior, Richard Goldschmidt, and another one coming up and who became a great geneticist was Kurt Stern. And it seemed both had worked on Drosophila. Kurt Stern found some results which contradicted Goldschmidt's published paper. And Goldschmidt was editor of a journal. Kurt Stern sends his manuscript to that editor, Goldschmidt, in which he's criticizing his papers. And what Goldschmidt as editor wrote back was, this was remarkable, that you read my paper, did not understand it, criticized it. I read your paper, understood it, I don't agree with your views, your paper will be published in this issue. I think that's the crux of real good peer reviewing system, that we do not become subjective. There's no conflict of interest. I openly say I'm not agree, but let the community decide later on what it is. And I think that's what we should follow as peer reviewers and editors. I actually published a small note on this experience in Current Science Peer Review Then and Now, that what kind of peer reviews we had experienced. I had one peer review, there was a comment on hand holding or copy editing. One of my PhD papers, single author paper, in good old days when there were no soft copies and typing thing, the reviewer rewrote the whole paper, retyped it, and sent, and the editor sends me back. If you think this is a good version, we'll consider your paper. Now, this was remarkable for a reviewer to type for a young person like me. I was maybe just for 24 years at that time. To retype the whole paper, to recast it without changing my findings, doing it, I think we sometimes need to handhold, as was Kishore was saying, that for a young person, you do handhold, give them training, and the peer reviewers may sometimes need to do copy editing as well. I mean, although it was said that we should not do, but sometimes we need to do that to help to be constructive, because you may find science is good, but person not able to present it, and some of them may not have money to go to a script writer or something. But particularly in our country, many of the places they don't have so much of money to go there. So a good science, because of poor writing, if it gets rejected, I will feel sad. And I actually do sit down and do extensive copy editing before I send my reviews. I try to follow that practice.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Those were very interesting experiences. Really, really insightful.
Yes. Dr. Pai has something to say.
Yeah, please, yeah.
I recently received a paper in my journal some time ago where I, as well as the referee, absolutely disagreed with the hypothesis. Nevertheless, the data was so well written and was correct. So we went ahead and published the paper. And what we did was even had a covering editorial where the editorial writer wrote that this is a very good paper, but don't just blindly accept it. You need to wait for further data to confirm or negate what this author says. Just because I disagreed with the hypothesis was not a good reason to reject it. The data was out there. It was honest data. It was correct, maybe for that period of time. So you have to look at it beyond your own views and give a fair hearing to the author. I took a lot of time over it, and I told the author that I'm going to take a lot of time over it because you are going against the grain. You're going against something which is fundamentally against what we've been doing all these years. But your data is good. I cannot disregard it. So I think the author was appreciative of that.
Wonderful, wonderful. So wonderful. Yeah,
Dr. Datta, you have something to add?
I had a very similar situation what Dr. Sanjay just said. And we are a multi-specialty journal. So at times the conflict starts happening when a particular specialty is being reviewed by someone else, where probably the paradigms may be slightly different or their novelty element may be different. So we've had an issue where a particular, it was ENT actually, a journal being challenged by maybe a gastroenterologist about a particular problem. And finally, we realized both of them are right. So we invited that referee, who was very senior again, to write a perspective on this, or like an editorial on it, a guest editorial. And that conflict was resolved. It was a good article to begin with, but then that editorial opined on the other angle, which probably this specialist never thought of. So being a multi-specialty journal, at times we face conflicts not of interest, but even the varied training and the varied background which each specialty is trained through, that also was very different. And this is how we could resolve it. It was a well-received article as well.
So with this context, do you think that we should mention the name of the reviewer who has reviewed the paper at the end of it when we publish it?
Not as my journal policy does not permit that. It does not permit, but then we strictly go against it. Like that's why I'm not naming the papers and all. But definitely, it's very clear that we do ask some referees who have given some good comments or good this thing to write a commentary on that paper. It may not be but the person may not know that he is your referee. It's not never declared in our policy.
Mr. Ruby, you have any say on this?
Yes, we have a similar example for another journal where what happened was not a reviewer, but we got some comments from after the paper was published from someone else putting a different angle. And so what the editor of that journal did in consultation with our ethics team is that we published those papers together. So we published one angle of that particular research, and then we also published we asked the author to, the person who had to send in that comments, and he had initially sent it anonymously. So we did, the editor dug a little bit more into that, and then we thought that we'll publish that as well. So we published a second paper, and the editor made it a collective decision to do it simultaneously. And it became so interesting that after that was published, there was another, another aspect which we received. So that became like a series of, different opinions. And that journal is also on alternative medicine. So it's, it's not like, this my way or highway. So in fact, that those series of those articles became the most cited articles for that journal
Yeah, that's
because of that
very,
ongoing debate.
yeah, that's nice.
So
That's actually,
may I
yeah.
ask one question? Yeah, there are many editors, experienced editors on our panel. We often speak of misconduct by authors, but we often neglect the misconduct by reviewers. So have you ever experienced the misconduct by reviewers, maybe copying some paper which was sent to him or her and then publishing it as his own or her own, or maybe something else? So have you ever experienced such
Yeah,
misconduct by reviewers, and how did you handle it? So if you
may
have
not be the
some experience.
idea. Kishore, may not be the paper fully, but maybe the
The
idea,
idea,
because we have
exactly,
the expertise, similar expertise between the
exactly.
author and the
That's
reviewers.
idea plagiarism.
Idea plagiarism, yes, yes. So if you have some experiences of this kind and how to handle it, can you
How
throw
to
some light
prevent it? How to prevent
to
it?
prevent it?
So that's a difficult one. Probably the person who will copy that idea will submit somewhere else. Having said that, at times what does happen is that we have had the situations where probably a reviewer sits on a paper and does not review it in time because he's also working on or has thought of a similar thing. Very difficult to prove whether it was actually his idea or the peer review gave him that idea. It's practically impossible to prove it. But we have had reviewers who sat down on reviews or gave some review which was and second time added a few other comments and delayed it. The editor has to be very suspicious of such times at times and then probably change the reviewer or something. But it's difficult to prove and be punitive about it. But definitely, I'm sure such a thing does exist. But the clever reviewer would probably not give the same article back to us.
True.
Yeah.
True.
Ashwini and Kishore,
Yes,
now
sir.
I need to come in, because I need to go.
Please, sir.
I know this
Please.
interesting interaction will never stop,
No,
and
we came actually to the last question.
has to be
Yeah. That's my
continued. So, no, because I have some other
Yes,
engagement to go,
Surabhi also
and
has.
I'm sure I feel so awkward, I want to apologize, John, we are making him sit at very, very odd hours. Next time when you are organizing, please take care of the international timings. This is
What
not
else?
good. No, I mean, at 2 o'clock, you are asking somebody to join night. This is not good. You should arrange for some better timing which are suitable for all. We are now in a global.
I will send you a bill
Yeah,
if
I
my
know
sleep
John.
cycles are off.
I know John enjoys it. I know that. Thanks, John, for really very, very supportive and excellent presentations and insights which you have shared. Dr. Sanjay Pai, Dr. Piyush Sani, Dr. Rakesh Datta, Dr. Lakhotia, Surabhi, and everyone. I'm just chipping in, and actually I was trying to tell Kishore, do not introduce me, but my mic was not on, so I had to restart and rejoin. So I'm saving time. But let me thank all of you for your time to join this session. And I just wanted to tell that at JIM, we consider this journal as a capacity building activity also. Because in Ayush, scientific writing itself needs to be really promoted, encouraged, nurtured. These are the skills which our community needs, and therefore we have seen that our reviewers, have been extremely patient. I can imagine, I remember going up to 10 cycles of reviews, and even after 10 or 12 cycles of reviews, rejecting that paper. I don't feel happy about doing that, because authors feel so discouraged. But I also must appreciate patience of authors. After rejection also, they have written to me and they have said, process the kind of learning that they have come. they will come better prepared next time. I think this is the spirit Ayush sector is showing. And all of you are supporting that, especially Dr. Pai, Dr. Sani, Dr. Datta, all of you are coming from the modern medicine side, where relatively the publishing and the research is fairly stable. Not really stable if you talk in terms of the global situation, but at least in India, it is fairly stable. As far as Ayush is concerned, they're on a learning curve. So we have to really go a step ahead to help them, to guide them. And that's what all of you have been doing very, very patiently. So I wanted to thank not only this panel, but the entire pool of our reviewers, who are today with us through YouTube and other channels, So without their help, guidance, and efforts, this is not possible. And also, I want to thank authors for being patient, because when author submits, every author is anxious. Every author wants to know answer immediately. And we may take a lot of time, because unless and until we are satisfied, we can't take decision. And authors also keep on writing, but we have to engage with them. We have to tell them, and they do respect, they do agree. Sometimes they get disappointed. So this is all in the life cycle of scientist life. So that's what we are trying to take it to the fraternity of Ayush. And so JIM we don't consider just as a journal wherein we get mechanically some papers, we mechanically review it, we mechanically send our reports to the authors, and we mechanically take the decision. We are working with them, and while doing so, we ensure that we don't compromise on ethics principles at all. That is something we have been very, very particular. So the guidelines given by COPE or various other organizations, are very, very strictly followed by the editorial team. I also want to share that while our the 10-year journey has been very interesting, the kind of support that we have been receiving from the publisher, that is Elsevier, is also important, because I know that an international publisher like Elsevier, their terms are very different. Their approaches are very different. And if we are able to, or if we want to really adopt the same system and the same processes and rules in terms of finances for India, then the whole model becomes very, very unsustainable. So they have gone out of the way and come out with a special model for not only for India, but realizing that Ayush sector especially needs this kind of attention. Global attention is necessary. So I also wanted to specially thank them as well. And while you introduced Dr. Lakhotia, Ashwini, you forgot that Dr. Lakhotia, in addition to the great scientist, he himself has been a great editor. I have been inspired by his many editorials which he has written in Current Science, or he, during his tenure, has taken the proceedings of that academic journal to a new height. So these are the people, or Dr. Piyush, working on the journal. So Indian journals getting global recognition, what Dr. Datta may be doing, this is a small group in India. And so the effort of interacting with each other becomes very important. Learning from each other becomes very important. And experiences at the global level, which John brings in, are extremely important, because our experiences in India, we have to get in connected with what is happening in the world. And we have to go on climbing up the value chain. That's what the effort we are trying to do at JIM. I'm happy that the JIM team now is getting organized better, and a lot of JIM editors are proactively coming forward. I just learned that now one of our associate editor has come out with the idea, Supriya, has come out with the idea that she wants to do journal club, web journal club in different Ayurvedic colleges all over India. So this is a wonderful activity, you know. If journal club spirit and journal club culture gets into Ayurvedic colleges and institutions, you know, then lot of students will get benefit from them. So such efforts become part, not only this webinar which we are doing because of the peer review weeks, but we want to keep this as a continuing activity, because as I mentioned, this is a capacity building activity. We look at it as a capacity building activity for the sector. And again, I want to really thank all of you for your support and help and guidance. I'm sure with this kind of effort from the young editors who are coming now, the sequence of the or the chain continues, and that is what otherwise, because now John was also telling me that he is nearing 70. Don't go by how he is looking now, but and naturally, you know, you have to go on taking decisions of your own. Dr. Lapotia also at one point of time, he may have been extremely busy and active. Now that is not possible. I am also not looking after JIM as used to be. But now the next generation should come in and take up those places. So this capacity building is not about authors only. It is about reviewers also. It is about editors also. So it's the whole ecosystem that requires this capacity building. And this is happening. And therefore, I'm very happy about it. Let's continue on this journey of not only publication, but knowledge generation, because good publication will emerge only when good research happens, you know. So that kind of a guidance is also needed for sectors like Ayush. And therefore, these kinds of webinars, these kinds of training programs, these kinds of different journal club-like activities, they mean a lot. And we hope to continue that with your support. Thank you very much. And I will now hand it over back to the Ashwini or Kishore, whoever are organizing. Thank you very much and all the best. And again, thanks, John. I'm really feeling very awkward to keep you awake at this point of time, as you have been absolutely sleepless throughout the night.
May I just say, it has been, it was worth getting up at 1 in the morning to do this, and maybe at 10 in the morning I won't feel the same way, but it's been a real pleasure and an honor to join with you, and I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So I do the best part of the program now, thanking all of you. And I know that as we said, there is tsunami of papers, there is tsunami of webinars and discussions on the online discussions and everything. But you have done justice to this webinar, I can say, and you have been so nice. All the speakers and the panelists, I thank you a lot. And also the audience. I'm sure there are a lot of webinars coming, but registering, and we had kept this webinar only by registration. And since still we got so many registrations and everybody joined in on YouTube and Facebook, I'm thankful to all of them. I thank World Ayurveda Foundation for the back-end support, for streaming this on YouTube and arranging for everything. It's not a small thing. We just wanted to make sure that everything goes all right, and thanks to them. And I congratulate the JIM team, especially Kalyani, Suchata, Swapnil, Vedika, Prachi, and Girish for ideating this kind of webinar and taking it through. Also the reviewers meet which happened a few days back. So congratulate the team, and thanks to Bhushan sir to give all of us this space and time and making this happen through JIM, and thanks each and everyone. So and we look forward to many more such interactions for making our reviewers and editors doing handholding, as Bhushan sir said. So thanks everyone, and that brings us to the end of this webinar. And if Kalyani has anything to say, otherwise we will close this session. And namaste. to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Yeah. See you. Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you all.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been very nice and very learning for me as well.
Thank you, Dr. Ratta.
Thank you,
Thanks
sir.
a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining.
Yeah,
Thanks again.
yeah. Thanks, Dr. Pai, for being patient with us in the beginning. Yours was the first talk, yeah.
I
Till the
enjoyed
end.
being opening back.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
It has been a learning for us also. We learned a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
a lot of learning.
Thank you,
Okay,
Girish.
thanks, Pooja.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Kishore. Thank you, Ashwini.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. See you.
लिहू कसं हे होतच नाही.